ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everyone to Race, Equity, and Criminal Justice Reform Conversation, being hosted by the National Black MBA Association Atlanta chapter. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Tamara McLaurin. I'm the Director of Programs for the National Black MBA Association. And today we are joined by Keith Gammage and Cierra Cavor from the Fulton County Office of the Solicitors General. I would like to also extend welcome to our chapter president, Sonia Stallings Ward, and our Director of Government Affairs, Linda Jordan, who put this program together, as well as the entire Atlanta board. Just a few housekeeping items. This will be our 1-hour conversation during your lunch hour. Everyone's microphones have been muted, as well as your videos have been hidden for the duration of the call. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A box, and we will take the last few minutes of this hour to address any questions that you may have. If you have any other concerns, feel free to also write in the chat box, and I'll be monitoring it for the next hour. This conversation is being recorded and will be made available at a later date. Just a quick announcement, we have another upcoming event this Monday, July 27th. It's Accelerate Your Career Virtually, and it will include select HR professionals as well as D&I professionals. Please register by clicking on the flyer in our upcoming eBlast newsletter, as well as I will share the link this hour in the chat box if you're interested in registering. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our moderator for the hour. Travis Townsend is the founding partner of the law firm of Townsend and Lockett, LLC in Atlanta, Georgia, and he leads its business law, corporate and securities transactional practices. He is a managing consultant with Trinity Consulting Company, specializing in operations, processes, leadership, and criminal law literacy. Travis is also an adjunct professor on faculty at the Emory School of Law, where he teaches deal skills transactional law practicum. Outside of the professional arena, Travis currently serves as our current Vice President of Operations for the chapter and is a co-founder of MAFDET, and I might be saying this wrong, so I'll just say the letters, MAFDET Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to eliminate disparities in education and employment opportunities in undeserved communities. Travis also serves on the executive committee of the Cierra Institute of the Arts, Culture, and Environmental Board as its secretary. He is fully committed to making a difference in the lives of others. He is a frequent speaker at community events and conferences. Travis is also a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. A fun fact about him, in 2017, he was a candidate for the mayor of city of South Fulton, Georgia, and garnered votes and financial support from thousands of metropolitan Atlanta residents as a leading fundraiser among 9 candidates. Travis earned his BA in psychology from the University of Michigan and his GD from the University of Michigan School of Law. So at this time, I will turn over the conversation to our moderator for the afternoon, Travis.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Tamara. And thank you for always putting together and supporting our fantastic programming as Director of Programs. You do a phenomenal job. I just want to, because we have you for an hour, the National Black MBA Atlanta's chapter, we always want to respect the time of our professionals, and so we're only going to have you for an hour, but this information is extremely important. So I'm going to give you a quick overview, and then I'm going to introduce our guests, and we'll get right into it. One of the reasons why we decided to invite Solicitor General Keith Gammage and his office is because there's a lot of conversation, a lot of interest in criminal justice reform out there, and there are plenty of ideas, suggestions, and recommendations, but just quite frankly, there's a lot of confusion, a lot of mystery, and a lot of misunderstandings and misinformation that's out there. And so we decided to invite the people who do it, live in it, specialize in it, the general of justice and his department who deal with prosecutions, defense. They can make the difference between setting someone free, layering and laying down charges, and actually sort of really hearing and understand victims and representing the government with the stroke of a pen. And so somebody who does that every day, that's who we need to be hearing from. And so it's a pleasure and an honor. And I just want to give you some background into the expertise and the experience of the people you'll be hearing from today. So we'll start with Ms. Cierra Cavor, who is the records manager for Fulton County Solicitor General's office. Ms. Cavor is responsible for the daily intake of all cases there, data entry management, and statistical performance measures, which is important. A lot of times we don't appreciate the details of capturing information and data and how it dictates and influences policy. And she served in that role for 2 years. Prior to that, she was office manager for Fulton County District Attorney's Office. So she has extensive experience in criminal justice. Because of Cierra's professional leadership, she was selected to serve on the Fulton County Justice and Safety Priority Working Group to develop strategies, objectives, and measures to improve our justice performance. Cierra Cavor, she has also worked on many task force. So, she is experienced in fixing the problems and improving, tweaking, iterating the criminal justice system within Fulton County, in addressing repeat offenders, jail population, sentencing success within Fulton, just to name a few. Now, she holds a master's and a bachelor's degree in public administration and criminal justice from Clark Atlanta University, CAU. And during her matriculation, Cierra was inducted into the Alpha Phi Sigma Criminal Justice Honor Society and recognized for her academic excellence. She's amazing. Can't wait to hear what she has to share with you guys. And now, Solicitor General Keith Gammage. He's our elected, and you gotta get votes and support, and you have to actually serve to be an elected official. Solicitor General over misdemeanor prosecution for Fulton County. Solicitor General Gammage both loves and fears the Lord. He's happily married to his amazing wife, Dr. Shauna Gammage, and together they're raising their son. Keith serves as a trustee at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where his wife is an usher. Solicitor Gammage has been honored for his work in the criminal justice reform by the United States Attorney's Office, the Georgia Senate, and House of Representatives. Additional accolades include the Gates City Bar Award for Civil Rights and the Pinnacle Award for Equality and Justice, as well as other honors. Solicitor Gammage receives his greatest reward in service to others and is a champion of Jobs Over Jails programs and faith-based expungement events where thousands of nonviolent criminal records have been wiped clean so they continue to participate in society. And all this while maintaining public safety. You all, we can't hear the applause, but I'd love to, if you got a reaction and in your mind, clap for Ms. Cavor and Solicitor Gammage. So we'll get right into it. And so I'll let them introduce themselves and what they do through some of the questions. So for those who are participating on the Zoom conversation and listening and viewing this webinar, they might not understand completely what the responsibility and the role of a Solicitor General is. Can you just provide a brief summary of your charge and your responsibilities as a Solicitor General?
Attorney Townsend, thank you. And I want to take a moment and say thank you to Sonia Stallings Ward, President of the National Black MBA Association Atlanta chapter. I want to certainly thank Ms. Linda Jordan as well, my friend who, along with you, Attorney Townsend, extended this warm invitation for us to speak to this great body. And it's always important and always a good time to speak to an elite body of our people. It's a special significance for us to be able to come out of courtrooms and have conversations in the community, even during this pandemic, with other servants and leaders. So additionally, I cannot start any presentation, Attorney Townsend, without us just taking a moment, because we lost giants.
Yes. Not
just giants for us, but international servant leaders who shed blood for each and every one of us who are in attendance by Zoom today. And so I want us to, in our own way, recommit and double down on our pursuit of equity and reform, not only in the criminal justice system, but in the business community as well. Because we've got to provide opportunities for those who have earned the right to pursue excellence, and also for those who made a misstep. So I want to just pause for just a moment, please, and have us consider the Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian, our hero, and Congressman John Lewis, our other hero. Thank you. I must say again, we wouldn't be here. I certainly would not be an elected official without them shedding their blood. And that philosophy that they have and the trail that they blaze is what my team looks to as we consider race, equity, and criminal justice reform. So along with me, as you've heard, is Ms. Cierra Cavor. And as everyone knows, when you really want to get great work done, you bring on a great team. And the truth of it is, although I love my brothers, ladies really lead and do it in an exceptional way. Ms. Cavor is so much more than an office records manager. She really controls the flow of the paper into the office, and then each stream that it goes out to, where the prosecutors are making fair and equitable decisions, she's engaged with them. So Attorney Townsend, thank you for giving me that moment of personal privilege. Now, your question, please.
Oh, to repeat, for those who are on the webinar and viewing and who might not have a complete grasp of what the Solicitor General's job is and what you do every day, if you could just, however you want to do it, communicate and explain sort of what your charge is, what your responsibilities are, and maybe even walk them through sort of a day-to-day process from arrest to conviction.
Thank you. I think you all may have lost me, but I'm going to start talking while I try to figure out my technology here. So the role, the charge of the Solicitor General or any elected prosecutor is first to pursue justice, to investigate cases that come to them from law enforcement agencies. In Fulton County, where I am, we have 15 different municipalities across Fulton County that all are engaged in investigation, at least initial investigation, and then arrest and charging decisions. When those decisions occur, my office has the honor, quite frankly, and the responsibility of determining after an investigation and a review what we should do with the case. By that, I mean whether we should levy the power of the state by bringing criminal charges against the person, or whether we should find some alternative to prosecution. The type cases that we're engaged in, and it's at about 50,000 cases a year. That is a huge number. And let me say a little bit about those cases. In our view, based on our philosophy, every case represents the humanity of both an individual who may be accused, along with victims, witnesses, and law enforcement officers, and the community concerns and the family members associated with both the accused, the witnesses, and the victim. This is a hefty task. It's a big assignment. We're honored to do the work. So in a nutshell, we're engaged in making determinations about what cases should be charged and brought through the criminal justice system. Alternatively, we're making determinations about whether a person is actually innocent and may not have committed the offense as alleged in the initial report. Engaged also in reaching out to those who are victims of crime, engaging with law enforcement, and trying to figure out what the right resolution is that provides an actual solution to the problems that plague the criminal justice system. Mr. Townsend is right, and I often remind my staff and court officials and the community that it is the power of the prosecutor's pen that can send someone to the gallows, send someone to jail, or can be engaged in restricting or expunging their record. It is the power more so than a judge has, more so than a defense attorney has, more so than a criminal investigator with a law enforcement agency has. It is the pen and power and conscience of a prosecutor who makes these decisions with regard to what happens on a particular case. As the slide reveals, we handle such cases as domestic violence, cruelty to children, stalking, vehicular homicide, DUI, a number of different types of thefts, from shoplifting to fraud and forgery. In addition, we have on our desk right now about 300 incidents that are alleged to be crimes committed during the protest movement here. I hope that I'll get a question about that as we go through and develop and have this organic conversation. The maximum penalty for a misdemeanor, for the most part, there are a few exceptions, is 12 months in jail and a $1,000 fine. Which I can continue, Mr. Townsend.
So that's a great intro and entree. You mentioned we have lost some of our giants who have, honestly, sometimes you can get accustomed to revering individuals who've done so much and been so brave for so long that you think you let them take care of it because that's what they do when they're so good at it. But there's a void now, right? When you have giants and leaders, people that have displayed the bravery. Sometimes I think about some of the scenes I've witnessed with respect to Congressman Lewis and Reverend Vivian. Is that could I do that? Could we do that? In that backdrop, regardless, there's a void. And as a person who has such power in the solicitor's office, what do you feel is your responsibility to sort of handle that, represent, and get in those shoes as best you can? How do you honor their legacy with people in the streets marching as unrest with respect to fairness in the criminal justice system, and you are a key player? Given their legacy, how does that impact you, and what do you think your role is and should be?
That is a great question, and I start my day, and sometimes in my evening, in my prayers, asking for the wisdom and the courage to continue the journey toward justice. Wow, that's a lot to digest. So I think all of us have a responsibility. It's not just the elected person, not just the prosecutor. It's every one of us. My first responsibility, if I break this down a little bit, is to make sure I'm leading the kind of life that makes my wife and my son proud, and that honors my parents. And that might sound kind of, leave it to beaverish, but that's the truth of it. And so beyond us building a good name for ourselves and working to improve our community and the broader community by impacting and touching whoever we can and lifting them up and trying to be better and make the world better, I think when we look to these giants who gave so much and some who continue to give so much, we should look to them as an example, and we should seek, especially those of us who have a bully pulpit, those of us who have been empowered by the community, either by ballot or by having some business success. And so we have some, those folks have some money that they can spend toward improving our community. But I think, Attorney Townsend, that we have to have a calling on our lives to do something about the issues that face us. There is, and I know you'll be familiar, Attorney Townsend, there is a not so well-known lawyer, known in some circles, but he is or was the mentor of Justice Thurgood Marshall. His name was Charles Hamilton Houston. And what Attorney Houston would talk about is what is the responsibility or the charge or the calling of the Negro lawyer. And what he would say, and it extends to people in the business community, and what he would say when he mentored Thurgood Marshall is that the Negro lawyer has a special calling that they have to use everything they've learned, I'm paraphrasing, everything they've learned, their skill, their ambition, their excellent education, and the Constitution to provide justice for the least among us, especially for their community. And I think about that every day. So we have huge shoes to fill. And sometimes our steps are baby steps. But do I think there's a void? I'm not sure of that, because every single day we're seeing our young people rallying and making this outcry. And we're looking at, beloved, we're looking at monuments to slavery and monuments and symbolisms of the Confederacy on state property across the world, quite frankly, fall down and be taken down because the protesters are demanding it. And here's what else they're doing by their demands. They're empowering elected officials and demanding that elected officials, black and white, go even further toward removing some of these vestiges. But what we have to do at the same time is make sure that we're not just removing the symbols of oppression, but that we're every day pursuing equity. So in the introduction, when you mentioned that we have expunged thousands of records, that's an attempt to erase the vestiges of an unjust system. It's an attempt to try and correct the wrongs that I saw in Atlanta and Fulton County for so many young people who grew up and came of age when I did, who may have made a misstep, and they were sent to prison, and they were overly prosecuted by the system. And to be quite boldly honest, many of our elected officials were a part of it, or were at least asleep at the wheel at the time, in my view. And so we're looking to correct those things by our actions. I'm very passionate about these issues, so if I go on, right, just push me back to the question.
Yeah, actually, I want to put a pin in that and make sure we emphasize what you just said. So, from your position as a solicitor, you have the ability to help clear records. So, really give people a fresh start. And so, again, I want to go back to the point I made at the top of the conversation, is that we really need to know who has the power to do things, right? Like when I do criminal law education primers, I really try to focus on helping audience members understand, look, there are a lot of ways to skin the cat, but there are more effective and efficient ways. And with respect to you having the ability to sign, we're going to charge this person with murder, we're going to charge this person with battery, we're going to charge this person with aggravated battery, the degrees, we need to be talking to and knowing who our solicitors, who our prosecutors are, and pay more attention to those things on the ballot. So you're saying you have the ability to clear records out. That's an important thing. I want to make sure our audience understands that, and that didn't get left in the wash. That was a very, very important point. And you can kind of downplay it, so you're very humble. You've always been a humble person. But I think people need to understand the power of the prosecutor, and that's one of the things I really want you guys to take home if you're at home listening. With respect to sort of you mentioned your expungement, could you tell us a little bit about just one example, or you've done that? That's a program that you do.
So thank you for the question again, Attorney Townsend. Before I was elected, I served as a prosecutor in a leadership role in a neighboring county. And people would come, one of my responsibilities as the chief prosecutor there was to review applications for expungement. And it was a good office, it was well run, but here's the traditional model with regard to expungements, or what's now called record restrictions. An individual who made a misstep, maybe even 20, 30 years ago or last month, they could be 70 years of age trying to pursue senior housing, or they could be 17 years of age trying to graduate high school and get into college or the military, but they both got some mark on their record. The traditional process would be you go out and hire a lawyer at an amount of $2,500 to $5,000 to consider whether or not you are a candidate for an expungement, to remove it from your record. And so, first of all, you have to come up with the money. And this is usually somebody who's already been in a situation where their opportunity at success is lessened because of the record. So if they're unable to come up with the money, they never get considered. Secondly, once an application is filed through law enforcement, it used to be a very, very lengthy process. And so I committed that if ever elected as a prosecutor, we would actually not only wait for people to come in, but that we would engage in the community. So across Fulton County, we have now conducted 14 expungement events, starting at my church, which is Ebenezer Baptist Church, and going all the way up to the Temple in Buckhead, where we've done them in partnership with the Jewish community. We've done them in partnership with Cascade United Methodist Church, with a number of unions across the county. Here's the point though. What we did is left the courthouse, came into the community where we belong, right? Our community. And we said, for those who have a misstep, come to us free of charge. You don't need to hire a lawyer. The prosecutor can review your case, your situation in Fulton County. Here's a couple of things we can do. A, I can just give you for free a copy of your criminal record. And then you can know how to fill out an application truthfully because you've got it there. And then we can guide you through that process. And if I can remove something off your record, we're gonna do it. And then, Travis, what we also did is partner with the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce and a number of other unions and community groups. And what we did is then brought what we call our Jobs Over Jail program. And here's what we said. We said, come in here, get your record clean, nonviolent, low-level offenses, get your record clean. And we're gonna partner with people who will give you a second chance at a job. And we have expunged about 3,000 records so far. And I'm gonna say this, I'm gonna brag on my team because, you know, leaders have vision, but it's carried out by the team members and the folks who really carry the burden of doing this. It's not even a burden, the responsibility of doing this important work every single day. And so with that in mind, we have people who call and write and say, as a result of an expungement, I now am in the military, or I now am admitted to college, or I've graduated school, or otherwise I now have a job. So to take the role of prosecution, right? The people who usually just lock you up, to take that role and say, listen, for those who want a second chance, we're committed to trying to give it to you. And there are many folks who we couldn't help because the law hasn't been expanded as far as it should be. But then we partner with the Georgia Justice Project. You all should, note the Georgia Justice Project, and they're engaged in trying to help people from the defense side obtain second chances. So sometimes when we couldn't expunge the record, the Georgia Justice Project would be referred in, and they partner with us on these programs. But I want to make this point. I know I'm long-winded. I'm Baptist. I'm a politician now, or an elected official, and a lawyer, right? So I got a lot of words. But if you check this out, when we started this, when God inspired us to do these expungement programs, no one in the state was doing it. In fact, people were telling us, you're wrong as a prosecutor to do that. But you know what? We thought about Congressman John Lewis, thought about Martin King Jr., thought about Dr. Vivian, thought about our parents and those who've fallen, and put our shoulders to the grindstone. And we kept moving forward, okay? And then there have been new laws passed in our state. We're waiting right now, hopefully Governor hopefully Governor Kemp will sign this bill that expands expungements. When I checked about a week ago, he hadn't yet signed it. But that legislation was a part of the work we've done. And across the state, people have actually, other prosecutors, Republicans as well, have started doing expungements with churches in the community. And it's the model that began in Fulton County. And in my view, that is a testament to having great team members who could pursue justice in this way.
Solicitor, again, that was a lot to unpack. I think I'm gonna take my role in this thing is to just make sure I highlight, because you share so many nuggets, and I just want to reinforce them. So I might just be regurgitating some of the things you said so that we make sure that our audience doesn't go past them. So one of the things, it seems that there is a lot of power, and we talk about criminal justice reform, just in knowing who your solicitor is, because the approach they take. You said there are people who were telling you were wrong to be working on expungement. You're a solicitor. Your job is to actually prosecute folks. And so there's a nugget there. Depending on who's in those positions, with respect to who's going to prosecute officers maybe who have who we believe have used excessive force, right? That's going to be a decision from a person in your seat. And so paying attention to that. There's a lot of unrest and demands for change in laws and change in policy in the wake of the murders of George Floyd and Rayshard Brooks and Ahmaud Arbery. But it sounds to me that there are some things we can do right now just by paying attention to who we elect and put into those particular offices. A prosecutor can have a lot of impact on whether or not one person gets charged, one person gets their record clean, one person never gets charged. So I want to bring that point home. You also mentioned that even if a person isn't so inclined to be a compassionate prosecutor, they still have, there are some barriers that you're facing with respect to legislation that are hamstringing you. And so I guess maybe we should also pay attention to that type of legislation. So if I'll give you an opportunity before we're done to kind of point people directly to that legislation. But the point is that knowing what legislation exists or is being considered that might make it easier for fairness to be played out by those who are so inclined, right? That's something that we can do. And the reason why I raise all this is that, you know, I'm a self-help person. The laws are there and they are very much bent against a lot of folks who don't have resources, people who don't necessarily come from a certain background, people of color, Black people. And when we march and when we protest, which is important, we have to raise attention to the unfairness and the unjustness of such laws. But there are always, I'm a fan of doing everything you can that's within your power before you actually ask other people to make change, right? Like, or at the same time, but you should always exhaust what you can do. And so it sounds to me like, hey, if you support prosecutors who are compassionate, if you pay attention to legislation that will help them do their jobs and do it in a certain way that creates equity, that's something we can all do. We can pay more attention to that, right? We can do that. I want to ask you for a little bit more. I'm gonna ask you to give us some more with respect to what we can do without, you know, it just in our own way right now, today. What can we do to make or help create and foster equity in the criminal justice system? Obviously, we're going to promote, you know, we're going to push for better sentencing, you know, smarter sentencing, reduce sentencing for nonviolent offenders. Look, if you got a marijuana charge, let's get you out of there, right? We're going to push for those things. But what can we do with what we have right now?
That's a fantastic question. I think, it goes without saying, we all have to vote, for one, and then become informed about who it is that is petitioning or asking for our vote. But I've got to go back and say, especially with regard to the National Black MBA Association, I have to commend you and salute you and your members for first being organized, okay? Because once we become more organized in various groups, we can petition not as individuals, but as groups, right? So if there's a letter coming from the president of the National Black MBA Association, and that letter is going to a state legislator or to a prosecutor or to a mayor or to city council, it brings the weight of the organization and its members to bear. And it is much likely to be more powerful than one individual or if we're alone. So I would say that we vote, that we organize, that we leverage the power of our organizations and our institutions, and that we look for and seek out ways that we can be of service. When I think of my friends who struggled through B school and earned an MBA, many of them have the opportunity to hire people. We're very intentional in the criminal justice system in my office about hiring from diverse backgrounds, right? And believe it or not, sometimes we've got a criminal history of someone who's applying for a job in a prosecutor's office. I always, if they meet the criteria, call them in and give them a second chance. And even though they're working in a prosecutor's office with something on their background, what I would ask is that those of us empowered to make hiring decisions, Travis, that's really where the rubber meets the road, is in economics. When many of our forebears were marching and struggling, right, that goes on, but it was for equality in the economic space as well. And so one of the reasons the criminal justice system has been unfair is because a person who traditionally does not earn the same, cannot receive the same justice. In our example of those 3,000 expungements, multiply 3,000 expungements by 2,500 bucks, right? If you didn't have 2,500 bucks, you couldn't even ask a lawyer to do it. So I think we can do those things, and every individual has to look to see what they can do to help someone else, and especially people who are trying to improve their lives. And I know this is going to be one of your questions, so it may be a segue into it. Listen, I'm an elected prosecutor. The system is not perfect. We're all hopefully working to try to improve it. Mistakes happen, right? Certainly police officers make mistakes. Certainly there are racist people in positions of authority throughout every system all over the world, okay? No doubt about that. But when we know that, we've got to be engaged in putting programs and policies together, holding folks accountable, and making sure that our hearts and our minds are in the right place. I think lastly to that point, we dismissed in the last 3 years hundreds of cases involving people charged with simple possession of marijuana. Now, that may not seem like a big deal, okay? But in some places, you pay a fine for that offense. In other places, still in Georgia, believe it or not, you go to jail for it. And I'm talking about a small possession amount. And so even during the pandemic, we've set up Zoom diversion programs where folks have logged on to our diversion program, charged with marijuana or other nonviolent offenses. And we have dismissed those cases, gotten them training, offered treatment for the people who need it. But here's what you gotta also leave with is know this. I have to get it right. My team has to get it right, okay? Because we've got, last time I counted, Ms. Cavor keeps these numbers, last time I counted, about 7,500 cases of domestic violence. So that usually looks like, you know, the gentleman in the relationship, it could go both ways, but in this example, this is truly usually the way it looks. The gentleman in the relationship comes home on Friday night, he's had too much to drink, okay? And he's not feeling good for whatever reason. He gets into an argument with his wife or girlfriend. It happens in front of their children, and he ends up striking her. After the argument, maybe she leaves with a black eye or a busted lip, okay? The facts could go so many different ways. I'm not saying that it's always the man that's the aggressor. That's just my example here. The little child runs in the closet and calls 911. The police arrive. And the little child, the little daughter who's calling, who's 9 years of age in the closet saying, my stepdaddy's beating my mama up again. She's saying, the 911 dispatcher is saying, are you fearful? She's saying, yes, I'm scared. I'm scared he's going to kill her. Okay, we get the police show up at the scene. If an arrest is made, if it's made, within days, that victim who's being abused and whose child is being abused by witnesses often is calling us and asking us to dismiss the case. And look at this, they're often saying to my team, if we don't dismiss the case, the gentleman is going to lose his job. And my prosecutors and the court and the law enforcement and others are thinking, if I do dismiss it, what message do I send to this 9-year-old little girl who called for aid for her mama? What message am I sending to the defendant if we don't fight against his immediate release? These are the kind of real life decisions that we're making thousands of times a quarter here in Fulton County. Another just quick example, we've got a case on my desk right now. We've got about 4,500 DUIs, okay? So I've got a case right now where many of them, but this one in particular, it is the 4th DUI within 12 years. This one involves a collision where a taxi cab driver was struck by the impaired driver, injuring the two parties in the taxi cab, totaling the car. Defendant goes to jail because of overcrowding, because of COVID, because of other considerations. He is immediately within a day released from jail. Zero treatment, zero assistance. This is the actual case. That's the taxi cab driver. And it's DUI number 4. Some people would say, well, let's get him the help and treatment that he needs. I agree with that. But what if I don't fight his release from jail and DUI number 5 results in our loved one being killed? Now, we're balancing all this with 40 prosecutors across, and we're short-staffed, understaffed, 50,000 cases a year, 40 prosecutors, going through 10 divisions of state court, along with 12 or so magistrate court proceedings, which are happening every day, Monday through Saturday. We're making these decisions sometimes with limited information and trying to figure out, I got to help this little girl. I have to help her mother who may not want help. And I have to figure out a way, by me, I mean the extension, right, other prosecutors, to help this father too, without ruining his life, but also without letting him kill somebody. At the same time, family, we're saying we got to also spend resources, because we set up an actual expungement hotline where you can dial my office and request online or by phone to have your record expunged, while balancing all these other competing interests. 16,000, I think it was, traffic tickets pending right now in Fulton County. We said, wait a minute, we're not going to spend our limited resources and time going after grandma or auntie, right, or Travis for running a stop sign, which I know he wouldn't do. Right, we're not going to spend our limited time and resources dragging people through trial for that. So we sliced those fines and fees down to about $75, up from what used to be $300 or $400, and said, in some instances, take a defensive driving class and we'll dismiss the case. In other instances, we've said we'll reduce it to a to an offense that doesn't have collateral consequences on your license. So you keep your license. You're a better driver. Ms. Cavor, go ahead.
It's called they're non-reporting offenses.
Thank you. So she's the expert. Non-reporting offenses means that if you're a CDL driver or somebody who, man, I have to drive to get to work.
Right.
I'm an Uber driver. This fine for speeding is going to cost me in my pocket, but it's also going to mess up my license and apply points. And then I won't be able to work, right? Because my license may be suspended and I can't get to my job. We're saying with these limited resources, what is our role with equity and criminal justice reform? It is to look at every process and every policy, bearing in mind public safety, okay? Because if somebody kicks in grandmother's door, I better prosecute. And I better offer a measure of punishment along with some rehabilitation and some healing for the victim and a way out, hopefully, for the accused. These are heavy things.
You hit a couple of things that I want to take a moment to pin and highlight as well. You know, you have spent a lot of time explaining the services and sort of how you approach your job as a service provider in a lot of ways. I mean, we talk about expungements and considering sort of balancing the dynamic in, between having to get justice and making sure that justice is suitable for even the victim's life after whatever action you take. It's a very difficult job. And, you know, but ultimately your role is to prosecute criminals and put people in jail. And for folks in our community, the Black community, a lot of times we're like, look, you're the man. You're the man, police. What would make, you know, it's been fairly apparent, I think, why a person of color, why a Black man would consider going into your profession based on the way you approach it. But so I want to put a pin in that because I always try to encourage individuals out there who might be considering careers or considering or mentoring or communicating to young people who are trying to figure out their lives, which a lot of our members are. You know, people come to us for guidance and we're role models. And so, you know, me personally, I try to promote and encourage more Black people to get into law enforcement. A lot of times we talk about how many racist and KKK members are in the police. And I'm like, well, okay, if they decided to do that, to implement a certain amount of power and authority, why don't we promote going into the police, right? The good guys, the real good guys going into police. So I always say, you know, that historic relationship between us and law enforcement, you've overcome that hurdle, that sort of aversion to being a participant. What do you have to encourage others, you know, aside from your stories? Like, do you have some direct pointed encouragement or some tips that folks can share with young people and that would encourage them to get into law enforcement? Because obviously we can do a lot in that space if we're on that side of
See, I know you're a great lawyer because you have great questions, right? So that is a great question. Let me just give this one example. Without going deeply political, though I will if I'm asked to, we have polar opposites. We have a governor who's saying don't wear a mask, or let me rephrase it, who has, and a president for some time who have almost discouraged us from wearing masks. Then as I drove past the Georgia State Capitol today, I saw hundreds of members of Delta Sigma Theta, the mayor's sorority, rallying outside the Capitol with signs that said DST supports our mayor and masks. I give those polar opposite examples, and they both might be actually doing what they think is best, hopefully, but those examples suggest to us the power of being in office. So the mayor is the leader of the police, right? We have police chiefs and ranking command staff, but the mayor and city council decides who the police chief will be and decides the philosophy of that agency, okay? That's a lot of power. So I would encourage us to pursue every endeavor of service. But when we go to law schools and undergraduate institutions and we talk about like law days, and we try to encourage people to enter into the profession of being prosecutors or in law enforcement, especially in our community, the brothers, the men usually say, no. I want to do defense work, right? We need that. But it's not the defense attorney's pen that can erase a record. It's mine. It's not the defense attorney's pen or ability that can set up diversion programs and say, we're going to not prosecute 25% of our cases. It's the prosecutor. We have 40 lawyers. 2 of them were, actually 4 of them on a rotation, but 2 assigned during the protests weeks back in Atlanta. We reached out to APD and to the Georgia State Patrol, and we said this, listen, I want my team to work with you in your field command center so that when officers are out there making these decisions around protests, right? They're making decisions on people like C.T. Vivian, people like Andy Young, modern day versions. And they're making charging decisions that could follow them for the rest of their lives, people who are protesting for our freedom. So we sent prosecutors into the field command unit with the police. And my mission, or rather my directive to them was this. I want you to go down there and make sure nobody gets arrested who is not a threat to us, right? If there's a peaceful protester who stays after the 9 p.m. curfew, then I want you, prosecutor, to discourage the officer from arresting them. And encourage, if they feel they have to issue charges, right? There's a line between interfering with the police and being helpful. But if you feel you really have to issue an arrest, then we're asking for an alternative, issue a citation. I've got about 300 of those cases I mentioned on my desk. But when I got calls back from my team, they said, Gammage, we found situations where, I'm gonna just tell you the truth. We found situations where the officers who are often undertrained, many well-meaning, some scared, right? All sorts of different manners of humanity and officers, just like in everything else. They were saying, because we were there, Gammage, they didn't arrest these young people. I've got examples of it and stories of it. Certainly there were some people who were arrested, but I get to look at those cases and truly decide whether or not they should be prosecuted after the arrest. You asked me a pointed question, I went off track. The pointed question is this. Please know that we have internships for your children. Ms. Cavor welcomes us inviting, and you all inviting young people to come down, certainly after the pandemic, and let us walk you through what criminal justice looks like. Let us better inform you on, like Mr. Townsend teaches, know your rights, how to successfully engage in law enforcement and survive. But also, we need to have the keys. Let me reemphasize that. I have the keys to this office in my pocket. You all gave them to me when you elected me.
Solicitor, again, I think So it's funny. I'd love to talk forever. I have we had a Q&A, and we have some questions in our chat box that I got to raise with you. I mean, but I think that was a very pointed point to kind of transition. I mean, you have the keys. You got the keys to the files. The files are people's lives. So let's take a few questions. There are some folks, this is an important question because sometimes people don't know how fast the process goes if you're arrested. What can you do to move it along? You know, the average person, if your life is impacted, you got to go to work, and you talk about some of these offenses that may not really be serious. How can somebody move their process along? What about like speedy trial? Can you give some suggestions and recommendations on getting through the process a little bit faster?
Okay. May I invite Ms. Cavor, if she would like, she manages a lot of those cases, if she would like to just lay some of that out, and then I'm happy to offer something in addition.
I would. Thank you so much. You guys have been engaged in this conversation going back and forth. I wanted to give you the opportunity. I have been paying attention to the webinar chat, and I saw a lot of questions regarding the timing and speedy trials. So there was a screen that I shared earlier that kind of laid out our process and the speed that it would take to get a case, you know, heard. Moving from arrest, and this is just typically a holistic overview approach of how we are handling our cases, and then how it could take time. A lot of times we don't want to get a case wrapped up in the courts and you're coming down, you know, 2 and 3 years later after you've been arrested. So, and I'll go quickly through this process flow, but the case documents are received from the arresting agency, and most times it's the preliminary police report that officer had given. At the time, it's submitted to our office. We'll have intake clerks that will enter all of the information that we can get. Was there a victim? Were there any witnesses? How many police officers were on the scene? Who all showed up? All of that, you know, preliminary data will be entered, which takes time when you have a very large caseload. The cases move forward to our investigators who gather any additional information, maybe the police officer's dash cam or their body cam, which have proven to be essential in today's prosecution. Were there any pictures taken? You know, was there a victim? Did she go to the hospital, or did he go to the hospital? Were there any pictures? The 911 call, like Mr. Gammage said, we want to hear that audio of that 8-year-old child begging for help. So gathering all of those different items from different places is very time consuming sometimes. We have victim advocates who need to make contact with any victims, calling to see, you know, maybe something happened later. Did you go to the hospital? Were there any medical records? Is there any, you know, bruising or any internal damage maybe that wasn't available when that officer first saw you, but, you know, a week later, you know, new information has surfaced. So we have advocates working with our victims and our witnesses that sometimes take a lot of effort to get in contact with. Everyone doesn't want to be helpful, if you will. Or, you know, so like he said, sometimes victims may change their mind. They don't want to prosecute their spouses or their partners. And so sometimes we have to give certain resources maybe to a family, to a mom, and that takes additional time to set up. The cases move along to a prosecutor who now needs to review all of those facts, any pictures, any video, any evidence, any audio recording, and make a reasonable charging decision. And so sometimes this is where the public gets confused or they're frustrated. Why is it taking so long for the prosecutor to decide if this person's going to get charged? Why, you know, does it take forever to present an indictment if there's a felony case, or put the case on the actual docket, or file an accusation if it's a misdemeanor case? So in the solicitor's office, we have many policies to guide our prosecutors on using a holistic approach, looking at everything that you have, and making the most wise decision. We need to look at the person's criminal record. Whereas, yes, it may just be a battery family violence case, but how many times has he done this before? Was this done to a different victim in previous years? So there's just a lot of different policies that guide our prosecutors into making a decision. If you follow this chart down the red path, it shows a formal prosecuting experience where a formal accusation will be filed. You'll go through courts, being arraigned, having any motions, and ultimately a trial that could end in a conviction, Or if you're innocent and exonerated, it can end that way as well. But that is a more lengthy process sometimes. In Fulton County, knowing that we have the most populous county in Georgia. And it does take a little bit of time to make sure that justice is fully served to you, but it should not be an excessive amount.
Ms. Cavor, so one of the things I want to make sure in that answer is that, it sounds like there's way more to processing a criminal case than the average citizen understands. I have to explain that a lot with respect to any aspect of my legal practice. And so you can have dissatisfaction with the process because people don't know. So I appreciate you. They don't know what all has to go into it, right? Like hey, this is what happened. Let's get to it. When is my day in court? There's a lot that needs to be done, and a lot of it is even to their benefit. So I appreciate you kind of illuminating that process so that people can have a better understanding. To say in service, a lot of times, and this is like customer service, you can take time where there can be things that you can't produce or provide to customers or clients, but it's really the helping them understand why and what goes into it. So I really appreciate you offering some of the secret sauce as to what happens in a prosecution so that maybe our viewers can understand and they can help give comfort to their family members or their friends or anybody that's exposed to that experience. We have probably one more time for one more question, and then we'll have to close up because we're right at 1 o'clock. And so I think what there's a question as to well, actually, this is a great one. This is a great one to close on. I think somebody said they mentioned that their son is heading to college to study criminal justice. How can they get more information about those opportunities that you mentioned for internship?
I think if you would just email Ms. Cavor, we're still trying to figure out how to offer some internships during the pandemic. Some of it can occur virtually, where at least we can kind of introduce young people to things, and especially folks who think they are interested in law school. I would love to have Ms. Cavor and a couple of other folks from the office kind of figure out what they're interested in. And so I know Ms. Cavor is going to share her email address and office number there in the chat. And Mr. Townsend, I should say that all of these things that we do in the system are in conjunction with other stakeholders. So for instance, in the state court, we've got Ms. Lenora Ponzo, who's our court administrator. We couldn't create and work programs out without people like that being helpful, without judges trying to do their very best to mete out justice with these high caseloads. So we're happy to have interns, and Ms. Cavor, I know, has put that in the chat.
Great, appreciate you. We are about to close out. I just kind of wanted to thank you guys for your time, Solicitor Gammage, Ms. Cavor. Thank you guys for such valuable information inside baseball, if you will, and just kind of taking the time out your day, especially with those busy, heavy caseloads, right? That's one of the reasons why sometimes our officials don't have time to come out to the community. And so, because they're busy trying to do the heavy work. And so I appreciate you taking your time. On behalf of the National Black MBA Association Atlanta chapter and our president, Sonia Stallings Ward, I really want to send our thanks. I thank everybody who logged on, who sent questions in the chat and participated, who are taking the responsibility. In closing, I want to make one last suggestion, and this is a to-do item. Go out there, you vote, you register to vote, and then show up for jury duty. Because we didn't really talk about this, but in the end, people are saying, look, how did these people get off? We get upset and say, why did these officers or why did this person who committed this crime get off? And it's because you're not in the jury box making the decision. You're watching TV complaining. You are doing everything you can to avoid showing up. You're getting sick on jury. Show up for jury duty. That is a place where you have power. You can influence the members. You can have input and insight. Go out, register to vote, and show up for jury duty. Appreciate you all. Thanks for joining the National Black MBA Atlanta chapter. Thank you.